Hello everybody, welcome to WhatCulture Gaming. I'm Scott, joined by Josh.
Hello, Scott.
Josh, my friend, it seems like the PS5 details aren't coming from Sony, but we've picked up on something anyway. How much is it going to be?
Well, brace yourself, because it's going to be a lot. This comes from a Bloomberg report that actually came out yesterday. Me and Kirsten briefly touched upon it in the video we did on every confirmed PlayStation 5 game. Mm-hmm. But these reporters have been talking to game developers, and there is an interesting tidbit in the article, and I quote, "Game developers who've been creating titles for the next PlayStation anticipate its price to be in the region of $499 to $549, which, Scott Telford, is a lot of wonga. It's a lot of chimichanga.
Can confirm it's a lot of wonga. The thing is, like, my comparison with Sony is always when they absolutely the bed back with the PS3 and they started going like, it's going to be $599, it's going to be $699, and then I remember their whole thing on the stage when they were like, don't worry, you'll get another job just to pay for it, you'll want to get another job just to pay for it, yeah. And everybody went, no we won't, we'll just buy the 360 instead. I think this is more measured obviously than that, and it's assumedly, I was going to say that they haven't really shown any hubris towards it, but they haven't shown anything, so no. I don't know, like they haven't done any sort of like stage things other than just revealing the logo.
I will get to that, Scott. There is another tidbit in this article about as to why, but yeah.
Yeah, it's just, it seemed like, to me, that feels about right for a launch day price for a console, especially considering what they're pushing in terms of all the ray tracing stuff and all these new hardware advancements and this new fancy controller with the haptic feedback and everything. I don't know, it doesn't seem too ludicrous, but at this point, I've lost track of how many consoles I've bought, and I always stupidly get them at midnight on day one. So this seems, I'm going to say reasonable, it seems like more of the same.
Well, it's obviously, compared to the PlayStation 4 at launch, it is quite a big increase. If this is the higher end, if this is $549, that's almost a $200 increase on the PlayStation 4 original. But we have to take into account that the components of the PlayStation 5 are way more powerful than we saw on the PlayStation 4. Like, the jump from the PlayStation 3 to the PlayStation 4 wasn't all that huge. The technology back then was also kind of dated, and it seems as though Microsoft and Sony don't want to make that mistake again. They want this next generation to feel like a proper leap. But with that comes a bigger price point. The article also says that, you know, Sony's been having trouble with the costs of the parts, with the scarcity of the parts, and that's led to them, even at the highest point, apparently they'd still only break even on every single PlayStation that they sold, because the technology is that costly. That
was apparently what they did. That was I'm referring to the PS3 again, just because for me the PS3 stands out as when they really got it wrong, and it kind of sort of pretty much cost them the generation, down to the giant Genji, you know, here's this giant enemy crab, all the way through to how much they priced the systems. But that was the same thing back then too, where they had all the Blu-ray diodes that were apparently incredibly expensive, and that was their justification for why the price had to be jacked up, because back then like Blu-ray tech was brand new and everything. But I wonder if they're kind of experimenting again with something in there that just is this mind-blowing new, I don't know, SSD style piece of tech that, like, you know, the industry is yet to fully embrace, and they're trying to like lead the charge on.
I'm sure that will be the case in some way. I think it won't be as big-headed as the PlayStation 3 was, because when it came to the PlayStation 3, that was a huge price point, and the cell architecture that console used was, you know, quite sophisticated for the time. But the issue is, it didn't matter when the developers struggled to use it, and it wasn't producing, you know, better games. Like, you know, a lot of third-party games ran worse on the PlayStation 3 than they did the Xbox 360, which was, you know, in comparison, relatively underpowered. But I think here they're kind of fighting an uphill battle, because what we've heard from the Xbox One X, like, those specs are sounding on paper to be even more impressive. Like, I think Xbox is going to be able to come out this next generation and still market their machine as the world's most powerful console. So Sony's kind of in this position where they've got a big leap. Like, the stuff they've packed into the console is impressive, and it is a major shift from the PlayStation 4, but they're still kind of lagging behind Xbox, and they're still trying to charge a higher price point. But that is reflected in, you know, their projections. They are producing fewer machines at launch compared to the PlayStation 4, and are expecting to sell fewer machines at launch, in part because of this higher price.
They are in the weirdest situation. They're not like, for me as a lifelong PlayStation fan, I mean, I don't know, I love all consoles equally, but at the same time, they aren't projecting any semblance of confidence with this whatsoever. Like, they had like I said before, they had the logo reveal reveal, they so randomly put a picture of their new controller on the official website and just said, there you go. And then, it's been Mark Cerny putting everyone to sleep for half an hour. Like, it's just been, it's just really weird. And then now it's like, well, we're projecting that we're probably not going to, we're just going to make a bit less. I know there's obviously the ongoing, worldly issues right now that are going to get in the way of production. But even Nintendo have got out there and talked about how the Switch was initially impacted, but they're ramping back up sales towards Christmas. And it's like, well, Sony, what the hell are you guys doing? Like, I've always referred to them as a reactive company. They always wait to see what the competition is doing, and then they act. But like at this stage, I guess, I don't know, for me there's enough things out there that they could be reacting to and being PlayStation, but it just, I don't know, the whole thing feels really messy and like they don't know what to do next, so they're just sort of, it's barely even a drip feed. It's just sort
I know.
Yeah, whatever we can spare, little droplets of liquid every 4 months. Like,
well, I think it is partly their problem with the messaging on their side, but obviously, things are happening in the world. And this report does mention that although their production hasn't been impacted by everything that's been going on, their marketing has been heavily, impacted by that in the rollout of, the DualSense and even the games and stuff like that has been completely dashed, which is why we've seen. They were quiet anyway, but it's why we've seen an extended period of silence, because apparently all those plans are essentially in disarray now, which will obviously as well impact the amount of consoles sold. But you mentioned, Sony being a reactive company, and I think that's absolutely true. In the fallout to this article, when people online have been commenting and stuff with their own insiders, it was mentioned that the only reason Sony would delay the PS5's release at the end of the year would be if Microsoft delayed it as well. So it's kind of funny how like both these companies are just sort of playing a game of chicken with each other. It's sort of like, should we move? Is this in our best interests? If we move, will the other person move? It is weird considering that Sony came out so confidently last generation. And you would think that they would do it again just to try and cement their status, but maybe it is a bit of caution on their behalf. Maybe they are a bit worried about falling or losing to some space or something like that.
Well, like last gen, I've always said this. I mean, I love the PS4, love the exclusives, but the amount of momentum that they gained by doing that, and by saying that they weren't doing everything the Xbox One was doing in terms of the DRM stuff, and putting that viral video out about how you share games on the PS4, that thing practically buried, Xbox One, and it gave them so much momentum at the start of the gen. But at the same time, like I said, when was the last time Sony pioneered, when you were proud at the beginning of a cycle to go, yeah, this is PlayStation, they're doing all the right moves from like, and it feels like what they want to do as opposed to what someone else isn't doing. That was pretty much the PS2, which was the graphical extension of the PS1. Like, a lot of that love carried over, and the PS2 is the highest selling console of all time. But it's just, since then, I've always kind of been a bit like, what are you guys going to do next? How do you continue? And for the most part, I guess it makes sense business wise. They just want to play it a bit slower, see what the competition's doing, and react to that. But yeah, I mean, what you were saying before, but there's like another tidbit, was that just the stuff about the additional industry insider details?
Yeah, that was just the stuff about, like the production not being affected, but the marketing being heavily affected. I think you are right, though. If you look back even at the start of the PlayStation 4, like the stuff that we love about the PlayStation 4 now wasn't really present there at the beginning. Like you said, they made those first inroads by reacting to Microsoft's like ridiculous failures, and also they didn't really have great exclusives back then either. If you remember, it's a long time ago now, but they had nothing for the first few years really. You had some decent stuff like infamous Second Son and Killzone,
Knack and the Order.
Yeah, Knack in the Order, Bloodborne and stuff, but it wasn't the major hitters like Uncharted 4 or Horizon Zero Dawn or God of War, Spider-Man, stuff like that. That came much later, so I don't know whether this is just par for the course at this point. This is just how Sony does business. They take a few years to get up and running,
it feels like they completely embraced their exclusivity pool. Like if you look at the exclusives list for I keep going back to the PS3. I kind of view it as just what not to do. So whenever I see things like this, I'm like, don't do that again. You look at the exclusivity pool back with the PS3, and it's like the Uncharted games, that Lair, it was called, that Dragon Control thing. And very little else. There was just, they didn't wrangle the first party studios kind of whatsoever across the PS3 time, and it was largely third parties that like sold that thing, even though on the 360 end it was doing so much better. And like you said, from 2016-ish onwards, it was just exclusives, consistently from Uncharted 4 all the way through to like God of War and everything. But at the same time, like you talk about the marketing before, like find a way, like on Microsoft's side, they're just putting out little 1 minute, 2 minute tech demos of like what it looks like when the system suspends multiple games or does a new feature, they can do that. They could have had someone just do a 10-minute, 15-minute breakdown of the PS5 controller, showing what it's like when it runs, how it works, the haptic feedback, the triggers. Like, just do that stuff for a live stream. Everyone else is makeshifting their business to come from home, and it's like, they can't figure it out. Like, what are we supposed to do? Like, come on.
That's the biggest frustration, right? Because I do think Sony has something special. I think what they're doing with the DualSense, with, like you said, the haptic feedback, the adaptive controllers, even the SSD, that's obviously a big deal. But the way that's being conveyed hasn't sold it to an idiot like me who doesn't know the ins and outs or isn't really interested in a long developer talk. You need something flashy. At the end of the day, marketing works, you know what I mean? You need something simple, you need something flashy, you need something to get people interested, you need something to sell people on these features and why they're so good, rather than, and I love Mark Sony, and I think Mark Sony? Mark Sony. And I think he's done some really great stuff. I think he did an excellent job with the PlayStation 4. I'm sure he's doing an excellent job with the PlayStation 5, but like, the messaging needs to be better. Like, it needs to be a bit more exciting. It needs to follow in Microsoft's footsteps in a way, and just have more grasp over that message and more grasp over that presentation.
Yeah, you just need someone, and I love Mark Cerny too, and he's perfect if you want a really intricate deep dive of the technology side of it, the hardware side of it, and he's a soothing dude. Like, guy breaks things down in a very easy to understand way if you know your terms and everything, but he's not a guy that you put on stage for your, what has been tweeted as the deep dive reveal of the PS5. It's just not that guy, and that was such a misstep. But yeah, whatever. I mean, there's endless things we can pick apart as to how they should have marketed the PS5, and no doubt we'll do some sort of list or in-depth video on it at some point in the future. But let us know what you think down in the comments below of the potential price of the PS5, and how do you think that they've been rolling it out so far. For now, I've been Scott from WhatCulture.com.
I've been Josh from WhatCulture.com.
I'll catch you next time. Bye.
Bye.